Welcome, today's story is full of drama. Like and subscribe to stay updated. Let's get started.
Oh damn, here we go again. I don't know why I let Marcus talk me into this anymore. It's always the same thing. These college girls always want their first date to be a double. They think it will make them safer, but all it really means is that Marcus needs someone to tag along on a blind date about once a month. Since a blind date is the only kind I get drafted to join him. Marcus is my best friend, and when girls aren't involved, he's a great guy. We make music and develop plans for the future together with ease. The problem is that I'm not very good looking, and I have trouble talking to girls, while Marcus is ridiculously handsome and has lines that could charm anyone. Tonight was no different than usual. Marcus was going out with a blonde bombshell, and I was with her brunette roommate. The poor girl wasn't unattractive, but she was completely overshadowed by her friend. My problem was that my date couldn't take her eyes off Marcus. I couldn't even get her to dance unless Marcus was on the floor as well. Unfortunately, Marcus had convinced me to drive, so I couldn't leave until he and the blonde were ready to go. One thing was certain: I wasn't going to get caught going parking with them again. I'd done that once, and it had messed me up for weeks. What hurt the most was that I had a crush on the girl and had to listen to Marcus talk about her afterward. I wasn't going to do that again. On the plus side, I didn't know these two girls. Hell, I wasn't even sure of their names after spending over 3 hours with them. Finally, the blonde said they needed to get back to their dorm before curfew. They were both freshmen and had to be back by 11 p.m. The brunette and I sat in the car outside their dorm as Marcus kissed her roommate goodbye. "You know," I said, "all you have to do is wait a week or two, and he'll ask you out. Marcus never dates a girl for more than 2 weeks. I'll let him know you're interested. Do you really think he would go out with me? Marcus will date anything in a skirt, miss. All you have to do is be patient." Marcus finally finished saying his goodbyes and feeling up the blonde's friend. I let her out of the car as he walked back. I didn't think about them again after that, figuring the blonde would go out with Marcus on her own now, and I wouldn't be needed. I forgot about them until I was reminded on a Tuesday morning about a week later. On that Tuesday morning, I was heading out of my apartment to go for a run. I alternated between running, lifting weights, and swimming to keep in shape. That morning, about 10 days after the double date with Marcus and the two girls, I stepped out the door and was confronted by the blonde. "Why didn't you warn me? Why did you just sit there and not say anything? If you're referring to how Marcus treats women, you wouldn't have believed me. Why haven't any of your dorm mates said anything? Marcus has been going through your dorm floor by floor. I figured you knew about him by now." "Well, no one told me, and now I have to watch him do it to my friend, too. She's head over heels for him, and nothing I say will help." "Yeah, I know. I've seen it more times than I can count. Every girl thinks she can change him, that she has something no one else does. They're all wrong. I'm not sure Marcus even likes girls. I think he just uses them. But he's your friend. Haven't you ever said anything to him?" "Not my problem, sweetie. It's not like he's taking girls away from me. After all, Marcus doesn't lie or promise anything. I heard him tell you he wasn't looking for a long-term commitment, and you ignored it. Beautiful girls like you take it the hardest. You get a little of your own medicine and can't believe it could happen to you. Now, if you don't mind, I need to run today." I took off running and left her standing there with her mouth open. When I got back 5 miles later, she was gone. I still didn't know her name. That afternoon, I was cleaning out my car, a 1974 Ford Mustang. I'd inherited it when my uncle passed away. My aunt didn't want the memories, so she sold it to me at a great price. The car was navy blue with a vinyl roof and racing stripes across the hood. It was a fun and affordable little rocket. I was leaning into the trunk, rearranging tools, when I heard a pleasant voice behind me. "Do you really think I'm beautiful?" Startled, I banged my head on the trunk as I tried to stand and turn around at the same time. "Ow, damn, that hurt. What the hell do you want from me? Of course, you're beautiful, but you don't need me to tell you that. You know what you look like. You've played men your whole life based on your appearance. You just don't know how to act when someone doesn't fall at your feet. Get used to it, blondie. Some guys aren't affected by your looks and won't bow and scrape to you. Now, I'll ask again. What do you want from me? Are you going to keep trying to make me feel guilty for my friend's actions? No, you're right. It's not your problem. Though I don't know how you can stay friends with him after the way he treats you." I sighed. "I don't know that I will for much longer. Marcus thinks he's doing me a favor, that maybe one of these girls will like me. He doesn't realize that when we're together, It just emphasizes how homely I am. He thinks all I need is a little confidence and I'll get my own dates, but he's never had to deal with rejection. I bet you never have either. No, I haven't, and I have to admit, it's not a very pleasant feeling. You're not homely, Ben. I'd say plain is a better description of your looks, but that could change with a little work. I heard Marcus say you were a sophomore like me, but I know he's a senior. How are you two friends? I did a tour in the army and Marcus didn't. We were friends all through high school and played in a couple of bands together. He's about the only guy I knew back then who was still in town when I got back, so we reconnected. I need to get ready for work, so unless you have something else to say, goodbye. Wait, would you give me a ride back to my dorm? I had a friend drop me off here without thinking about how to get back. What the hell was going on here? Either this girl was incredibly ditzy, or she had an ulterior motive. I just didn't know what that could be. Yes, I'll give you a lift, but I have to get ready first. I work at Midwest Pizza on Cedar Street, and I can drop you off on the way. Would you like to come in while I change or stay here with the car? She got a satisfied expression. Okay, now I understood a little better. She was manipulating me and thought she was back in control. Should I shock her or play along to see what she had in mind? She didn't say anything, just smiled and pointed at the building. I let her in, and at my apartment, I waved her through the door. You know, if you're going to keep popping up here, I ought to know your name. I'm sure Marcus introduced you, but I wasn't paying attention since I didn't expect to see you again. Okay, that explains why you kept calling me Blondie. I wondered why you were being so rude. My name is Amy Saunders. I know your first name is Ben, but Marcus didn't mention your last name. Taylor. Ben Taylor. May I get you something to drink? I have Coke and Schlitz. Take your pick. Amy sat down on my wood-framed couch. Coke will be fine. This is a really nice place. Not what I'd expect from a college sophomore. I handed her the Coke. Thank you. Now I really have to get ready for work. You can watch TV if you want or listen to some music. I shouldn't be too long. As I stripped down in the bedroom, I heard the stereo break out with Nights in White Satin by the Moody Blues. That was it, a question. What the hell did this girl want? 3 songs later, I was refreshed and dressed in my uniform. A white shirt and black pants. Nothing glamorous, but it worked. All right, Amy, shall we go? She had already been in my car before, although it was in the back seat last time, but she gushed over the power rumbling through the floorboards. I could see the calculating look in her eyes, though. She was trying to figure out how to work me. As I pulled up at her dorm, I asked her, "Am I going to be running into you again? You could be seeing more of me, Ben. Thanks for the ride." Work was the usual Saturday night rush in a college town. We sold pizza and beer, and the place was packed. I spent most of my shift in the back, prepping supplies for the pizza line. The day business had been unusually busy, and we were running low on prepared items. Around 10:30 p.m., I was out front taking orders when Amy walked in. I had to put a stop to this. I pointed to the end of the counter out of the way and met her there. "Look, Amy, this has to stop. As a matter of pride, I do not go out with Marcus's leftovers. I know you're feeling hurt and need to be wanted again, but you're barking up the wrong tree. I apologize if I've misjudged you, but please, stop following me. Unlike Marcus, I'm looking for a long-term commitment, and it won't be with anyone who looks like you." The betrayal in her eyes stung. It would haunt me for a while, but I'd seen worse. My dreams were already grim places. This wouldn't make much of a dent. My fun in Southeast Asia during my tour still dominated my nightmares. "I thought you said I was beautiful," she said, her voice heavy with pain. "Yes, you are, and that's the problem. You've already shown yourself to be vain and shallow. Beautiful women have way too many temptations to cheat, and most do. I need someone who wants to build a stable home and take care of our children without me having to wonder where she is. You'd be way too much trouble. There would always be guys flirting with you and trying to take you away from me, and at some point you'd go. I don't need that kind of country western song life. If you still need confirmation of your appeal, go bat your eyes at Joe over there on the register. He'll be glad to take you out. Now I have work to do. Goodbye." So much for the idea of playing along. I left her crying with her head in her hands and went back into the kitchen. She was gone when I returned to the front. I wondered if she'd taken my advice and approached Joe, but he didn't say anything, so I guess not. My manager's wife, Carla, cornered me during cleanup. "I heard what you said to that poor girl, Ben. You were very cruel to her, and you need to know that not all women are like that. How did someone so young get so disillusioned? The number of Dear John letters that arrived in country was staggering. Every guy who got one had been showing off pictures of cheerleaders and models. The guys with plain, little homemakers were safe. That's how I got so cynical. This girl has been stalking me all day, and I had to put a stop to it. Being nice didn't work, so I had to get rude. I hope it worked because I don't need anything to do with a girl like her. All these queens are too spoiled to make good partners. I need someone much more grounded. She's just trying to take revenge on Marcus by dating and then dumping me. She has no real interest in me. You're wrong, Ben, but I can see you're not likely to change your mind. Please don't be too harsh if she persists. I'll try to keep an eye out for her and make sure she doesn't bother you when you're working. That's the best I can do. Thanks, Carla. Too bad you don't have a sister my age. I'd be very interested. Carla laughed and left me to finish cleaning up. Sunday afternoon, I was making popcorn and waiting for Marcus to come over to watch football. My TV was bigger than his, and his parents didn't let him keep enough beer in the house to last through 2 games. I had a case of Miller High Life in the fridge just waiting for him. The doorbell rang, and I hollered for him to come in. The door opened slowly, and I glanced over, expecting Marcus, only to see Amy timidly step inside. Oh damn, what am I going to have to do to get rid of this girl? I muttered under my breath. Amy, what the hell are you doing here? I thought I made it clear I didn't want to see you again. I needed to talk to you, she said quietly, her voice shaking. I realized I might have been too pushy, and I wanted to apologize. Before I could respond, Marcus walked in through the still open door, his eyebrows shooting up in surprise at the sight of Amy. He probably thought she was here to try to get him to take her back. I almost wished that was the case. Hey, Amy, Marcus said. What's going on? I didn't expect to see you here. Amy's eyes darted between Marcus and me. I'm not here for you, Marcus, she said firmly. I came to talk to Ben. Ever since you dumped her, she's been stalking me. I snapped. What the hell am I supposed to do to get rid of her, Marcus? He looked at me in disbelief. Why would you want to? It's not like you go on many dates. I think you'd welcome the chance to be with a girl like Amy. I can get my own damn dates, Marcus. I don't need your leftovers. The fact that she's been with you is enough to make me not want anything to do with her. I've tried explaining this to her, but she doesn't get it. She thinks she can manipulate me like she has every other guy in her life, but it's not going to work. I don't need this, and I'm not putting up with it. I could feel my anger boiling over. My conscience had been nudging me for a while now, and I'd finally decided I couldn't overlook Marcus's behavior anymore. He might have been my best friend, but I was done enabling him. Amy's eyes filled with tears as she stared at me, her face a mix of hurt and defiance. Ben, I came by to tell you that you had it wrong. I wasn't trying to use you to get back at Marcus. I was interested in you. You treated me like a gentleman, and I liked that. I just wanted to be friends. Yeah, I know, I said bitterly. Friends, but not boyfriend. I've heard that a dozen times before, and it doesn't hurt any less now than it did the first time. I don't need your pity any more than I need Marcus's help. Now, would you both please leave? I have schoolwork to get done. Come on, Amy, Marcus said, putting a hand on her shoulder. I think we've hit some raw nerves here. Ben's not himself right now. Let's give him some space. As Marcus led a stunned Amy out the door, I yelled after them. Damn you, Marcus. I told you I don't need your goddamn pity. I survived a war. I can survive without you. I slammed the door shut and bolted it. Then I leaned against it and cried. I never cried, but that's what happened. Of course, I didn't get any schoolwork done after that. After a while, I put on shorts and a sweatshirt and went for a run. I didn't know how far I ran, but eventually, I realized it was getting dark, and I had no idea where I was. Luckily, I had my keys and wallet with me, so I found a payphone and called a cab. Later that evening, when I returned to my apartment, the phone was ringing. I hesitated, worried it might be Marcus, but it could also be my mom, and she'd worry if I didn't answer. I picked it up. Hello, Ben. It was my dad. Are you all right? Your mother talked to Marcus, and she's worried about you. Why don't you come over for dinner tomorrow? We can talk. Okay, Dad, I said quietly. That's probably a good idea. I'll see you tomorrow evening. Good. Drive carefully, son. I'll let your mom know you're coming. After hanging up, I felt a pang of relief. My parents were good people, steady and practical. If anyone could help me make sense of this mess, it was them. The next evening, I arrived at their house, which was across the river in the quieter northern part of town. My parents had offered to let me move back in after my army stint, but I was too used to my independence. Between the GI Bill and my job, I was doing fine financially. My mom met me at the back door, giving me a warm hug. "Ben, it's good to see you," she said. "Come in, dinner's almost ready." I hugged her back and set her down beside her chair at the kitchen table. "I'm fine, Mom. It's good to see you too." "Hi, Dad." Dad was at the table with a cup of coffee. "Grab yourself a bowl of chili, Ben, and let's talk while we eat." I scooped up a bowl from the crock pot and sat at the table, stirring it absently as I tried to organize my thoughts. "Marcus says you've never been this angry before," Dad said. "He's not sure what he did to set you off, and the young lady is apparently very upset. What's going on, son?" I sighed, staring into the chili. "I'm not sure, Dad. It's been building up for a while. Ever since I got back from overseas, and it just exploded yesterday. I get so frustrated with how girls my age treat me. They act like I'm their brother or something while falling all over Marcus. They say they want a nice guy, but they always go for the flashy ones. Marcus thinks he's helping me, but he just makes things worse. And now this girl, Amy. She's throwing herself at me, and I can't trust it. I know if I let her get close, she'll just dump me later." It all came to a head and I blew up. I know I hurt both of them, but I couldn't stop myself. My mom looked at me with concern. "Could this have anything to do with what you went through overseas?" "I don't know. It was hell and I try not to think about it, at least not when I'm awake." "You're still having nightmares then?" Dad asked. "Yeah, maybe not as often as I used to, but they're still there." "I think we need to get in touch with the VA," Dad said firmly. "You shouldn't still be dealing with this. They can help." "Okay," I said, nodding. "But could you talk to Marcus for me? I don't know what to say to him, and there's no way I can talk to Amy. She must hate me now." "If you just say to Marcus what you told us, he'll understand," Mom said. "I'm sure he'll forgive you." "I don't know if I want him to," I admitted. "I can't ignore what he does anymore, and I doubt I can convince him to change. Maybe I'd be better off without any friends. If there's no one around, I can't hurt anyone else." "That's no way to live, son," Dad said gently. "A man needs people in his life or it has no meaning. You need to make more friends, not less." I nodded silently and ate my now cold chili. Even cold, Dad's chili was good. I ended up staying in my old room that night, comforted by the familiarity. I slept better than I had in weeks. The next morning, I left my parents' house early to stop by my apartment and grab my books before heading to class. The day passed in a fog. I couldn't focus on anything my professors were saying. Work that evening was more of the same. Carla, my manager's wife, stuck close by, but she didn't press me to talk. I appreciated the quiet support. Wednesday was my day off, and when I got home from class, I was greeted by an unexpected sight. Amy was sitting on the floor outside my apartment door, her back against the wall, looking up at me with tired, red-rimmed eyes. "Please don't get upset, Ben," she said quickly, standing up as I approached. "I just need to talk to you." I sighed, fumbling for my keys. "I don't seem to have much choice." "Come in, Amy." I led her inside and pulled out a chair at the kitchen table for her, then started making coffee. "What do you want to say?" "I want to apologize," she began, her voice trembling. "Not just for showing up at work or here uninvited, but for everything. Marcus told me a little about your history, and I think I understand why you were so leery of me. I'm sorry for the way I've acted." I sat down across from her, staring into my coffee mug. "I appreciate that, Amy, and I'm sorry too. You didn't deserve some of the things I said. I've been dealing with a lot of stuff, and it all came out at the wrong time." "Marcus said you've been through a lot," she continued hesitantly. "He told me you don't talk about it much. But was it really that bad?" I took a deep breath. "Yeah, it was bad. I was a medic in the army, flying into combat zones to evacuate the wounded. I saw a lot of things I'd rather not remember. The last mission I flew, we were ambushed. I was shot and ended up in the hospital. It changed my life in ways I'm still dealing with." Amy's eyes widened, and she looked genuinely horrified. "I'm so sorry, Ben. I had no idea." "It's not your fault," I said quietly. But it's one of the reasons I don't think I'm good for you or anyone, really. I'm not stable, Amy. You don't need to be around someone like me. I don't think that's true, she said softly. You're a good man, Ben. You treated me with respect, even when you were angry. I don't want to walk away from that. I want to get to know you better. I shook my head, still skeptical. That's a hell of a lot to put on a guy, Amy, especially someone like me. But if you're serious, we'll take it slow. No promises, though. Amy smiled faintly, a glimmer of hope in her expression. Slow is fine. Let's just see where this goes. We talked for a little while longer, and for the first time I started to feel like maybe, just maybe, things could get better. Amy wasn't the spoiled princess I'd assumed she was, and I was starting to see a strength in her that I hadn't noticed before. I handed Amy a mug of coffee and sat across from her at the kitchen table. Look, I've been through some things that make it hard for me to trust. I'm sorry for how I spoke to you before, but I don't want to lead you on. I understand, Amy said, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. But I'm not here to ask for your trust right away. I want to earn it. You treated me differently from any guy I've met before, and that's why I'm here. I'm not sure what you see in me, I said, rubbing the back of my neck. But I'm willing to see where this goes, as long as we take it slow. Amy smiled faintly, some of the tension leaving her posture. Slow is fine with me, Ben. Thank you for giving me a chance. Now, if we're going to do this, you need to know that I have baggage, I said bluntly. A lot of it. I'm here to listen, she replied, folding her hands on the table. I hesitated, then began. I was a medic in the army. I flew medevac missions into combat zones. The last one didn't go well. We were ambushed and I got hit. Lost my stomach and part of my intestines. My body doesn't process food like it used to, so I have to take medication and drink alcohol with every meal to make things work. It's not something I can hide. Amy's eyes widened, but she didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said quietly, That must have been so hard. You're still here, though, and that says a lot about you. It's not just the physical stuff, I admitted. I have nightmares, bad ones, and sometimes, well, you saw what happened the other night. I can get angry. It's not who I want to be, but it happens. Amy reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Ben, I don't want to run from this. I want to understand you better. I stared at her for a moment, then nodded. All right, Amy, let's see where this goes. A week later, Amy and I went on our first official date. It wasn't anything fancy, dinner at a local diner and a drive around town, but it felt comfortable. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I had to put on a front. Amy was patient and didn't push for anything more than I was ready to give. By the time I dropped her off at her dorm, I was cautiously optimistic about our future. The following weeks brought a surprising sense of stability to my life. Amy and I started seeing each other regularly, always keeping things low-key. We'd have dinner, go for walks, or just sit in my apartment listening to music. She didn't pry into my past, and I didn't press her about hers. We were figuring each other out one step at a time. One Saturday, after a long shift at work, I walked into my apartment to find Amy sitting on the couch, flipping through a book she'd brought over. She looked up with a smile when I came in. I thought I'd surprise you, she said. You're getting comfortable here? I replied, grinning as I set down my bag. Not that I mind. I hope not, she teased. I wanted to ask if you'd like to come meet my parents over the holiday break. I know it's a big step, but they're in town, and it would mean a lot to me. Her request caught me off guard. I hadn't thought that far ahead. Meeting someone's parents was serious, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for that kind of commitment. Are you sure? I asked carefully. I don't exactly make the best first impression. Amy chuckled. You'll be fine, Ben. They're good people, and I think they'll like you. I hesitated, but the earnestness in her eyes made it hard to say no. All right, when do you want to go? Next Sunday, she said brightly. They live about an hour away. We can have dinner and be back by evening. Sounds good, I said, though my stomach was already in knots at the thought. The drive to Amy's parents' house the following weekend was uneventful. She chattered about her family, her mom's obsession with gardening, her dad's love for old cars, and how they'd always dreamed of her attending college. I listened, nodding occasionally, but most of my focus was on trying to stay calm. When we pulled into the driveway of a modest two-story house in a quiet neighborhood, Amy reached over and squeezed my hand. Relax, Ben. They're going to love you. Her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Saunders, greeted us warmly at the door. Her dad, a stocky man with a quick smile, shook my hand firmly. So, you're the guy Amy's been talking about, he said, sizing me up. Welcome to our home. Her mom, a petite woman with kind eyes, pulled me into a hug. It's so nice to finally meet you, Ben. Come in, come in. Dinner's almost ready. The evening went better than I expected. Over a meal of roast chicken and mashed potatoes, Amy's parents asked about my job, my studies, and my plans for the future. They didn't pry into my past, and I was grateful for that. By the time dessert rolled around, I felt a tentative sense of acceptance. You're welcome here any time, Mrs. Saunders said as we got ready to leave. It's good to see Amy so happy. Thank you, ma'am, I replied, feeling a warmth I hadn't experienced in a long time. Driving back to campus, Amy was uncharacteristically quiet. I glanced over at her as we stopped at a red light. Everything okay? I asked. She smiled faintly. Yeah, I'm just really glad you came tonight. It meant a lot to me. I'm glad I came too, I admitted. Your family's great. They think you're great, she said, reaching for my hand. And so do I. For the first time in years, I let myself believe that things might just work out. The weeks following my dinner with Amy's family felt different. There was a growing sense of calm in my life that I hadn't experienced in years. Amy and I continued to see each other, our routines now punctuated with moments of quiet connection. I started to feel like I was coming back to myself, still cautious, but less guarded. One evening, as Amy and I sat on the couch watching an old movie, she turned to me suddenly. Ben, can I ask you something? She said, her voice hesitant. Sure, I replied, though her tone made me wary. Do you think we have a future together? I mean, long term. The question caught me off guard, but I didn't shy away from it. I don't know, I admitted honestly. I like what we have, Amy, and I care about you, but I've learned not to make promises I can't keep. I want to see where this goes, but I can't guarantee anything. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. I can live with that. I just wanted to know where your head was. I appreciated her honesty. Amy had a way of asking the hard questions without pushing too hard, and that made me feel safe in a way I hadn't expected. As the semester wound down, Amy started talking about her plans for the holidays. She wanted to visit her family for Christmas and asked if I'd like to join her. I hesitated. Spending Christmas with someone else's family felt a little too personal, but she insisted. My parents liked you, and they'd love to have you there, she said. Besides, it'll be better than spending it alone. She wasn't wrong about that. My parents had invited me home for Christmas, but the idea of another quiet holiday at their house didn't appeal to me. Amy's offer sounded like a chance to experience something different. Okay, I agreed, but only if your family's really okay with it. They are, she assured me. It'll be fun, I promise. Christmas at the Saunders house was a whirlwind of activity. Amy's mom decorated every inch of the house with twinkling lights and festive ornaments, and her dad spent most of Christmas Eve in the kitchen, roasting a turkey and preparing sides. Amy's younger brother, Ryan, was home from college, and he wasted no time grilling me about my job and studies. Army, huh? He said, raising an eyebrow. Bet you've got some wild stories. Nothing worth sharing, I said, keeping my tone light. Amy shot her brother a warning look. Leave him alone, Ryan. I'm just curious, he said, holding up his hands in mock surrender. Despite Ryan's nosy questions, the holiday was surprisingly enjoyable. Amy's family welcomed me as one of their own, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I belonged somewhere. On the drive back to campus, Amy turned to me with a smile. So, what did you think? I had a good time, I admitted. Your family's something special. They think the same about you, she said. My mom told me she hasn't seen me this happy in years. Her words lingered with me as we drove in comfortable silence. Maybe, just maybe, this thing with Amy could be something real. The new year arrived with a sense of cautious optimism. Amy and I continued to grow closer, and I found myself looking forward to the time we spent together. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when my past loomed over me like a shadow, but Amy had a way of pulling me out of my head and grounding me in the present. One Saturday evening, we decided to go ice skating at a rink near campus. I hadn't skated since I was a kid, but Amy insisted it would be fun. You'll be fine, she said, lacing up her skates with practiced ease. Just follow my lead. The rink was crowded with students and families, laughter and music echoing off the walls. I wobbled my way onto the ice, gripping the railing like my life depended on it. Amy glided up beside me, a teasing smile on her face. Come on, Ben. It's not that hard. Says the pro. I muttered, inching my way forward. She laughed and reached for my hand. Trust me. I won't let you fall. Reluctantly, I let go of the railing and took her hand. She guided me around the rink, her confidence helping me find my balance. By the end of the evening, I wasn't exactly graceful, but I managed to stay on my feet without her help. See? She said as we sat on a bench, untying our skates. You're a natural. Not quite, I replied, chuckling. But I didn't embarrass myself, so I'll take it. As winter gave way to spring, Amy and I started spending more time outdoors. We'd go for hikes in the nearby state park or sit by the river, talking about everything and nothing. She opened up about her childhood, her dreams of becoming a writer, and her fears of not measuring up to her parents' expectations. In turn, I shared more about my own struggles. My time in the army, the injuries that had changed my life, and the nightmares that still haunted me. You've been through so much, she said one afternoon as we sat on a bench overlooking the water. But you're still standing. That's what I admire most about you, Ben. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just squeezed her hand and let the moment speak for itself. One evening, after a quiet dinner at my apartment, Amy surprised me with a question. Have you thought about what you want to do after graduation? She asked, leaning back on the couch. I shrugged. Not really. I've been focused on getting through each semester. Haven't given much thought to what comes next. You should, she said. You're smart, Ben. You could do anything you set your mind to. Her faith in me was both encouraging and intimidating. For so long, I'd been stuck in survival mode, unable to imagine a future beyond the day-to-day grind. But Amy made me want to try. I'll think about it, I said, and for the first time I meant it. As spring stretched into summer, life began to feel strangely normal. Amy and I were settling into a rhythm, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had something solid to hold on to. She challenged me in ways I hadn't expected, pushing me to plan for the future, to believe in myself, and to trust in our growing relationship. One evening after dinner, Amy broached the topic again. Have you thought more about what's next for you? She asked, stirring her coffee as we sat at my kitchen table. I've been thinking about applying for internships, I said. Something in logistics or supply chain management. It's what I studied in school, and I know I could do well at it. Amy smiled, a mix of pride and encouragement in her expression. That's great, Ben. I'm glad you're taking steps towards something you want. It's still a little intimidating, I admitted, but it feels good to finally be moving forward. You've got this, she said firmly. I believe in you. The changes in my life didn't go unnoticed. Even Marcus, who I'd kept at arm's length since the incident with Amy, commented on it when we ran into each other one afternoon on campus. You seem different, man, he said, leaning against a bench. More confident or something. What's going on? Life, I replied with a shrug, trying to figure things out. Good for you, Marcus said. Amy's been good for you, hasn't she? I hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, she has. Marcus smiled faintly. I'm glad. You deserve it. As the summer progressed, Amy and I decided to take a short trip together. A weekend getaway to a nearby lake. It was a chance to unwind and enjoy each other's company without the distractions of school or work. The trip turned out to be exactly what we needed. We spent the days hiking, swimming, and lounging on the beach, and the nights talking under the stars. One evening, as we sat by the campfire, Amy turned to me with a serious look in her eyes. Ben, I know we said we'd take things slow, she began, her voice steady. But I need you to know that I'm in this for the long haul. I see a future with you, and I hope you see one with me too. Her words took me by surprise, but as I looked into her eyes, I realized I felt the same. For the first time, I wasn't afraid to take that step. I do, Amy, I said, reaching for her hand. I see a future with you too. Her smile lit up the night, and in that moment, I knew I'd found something worth holding on to. The weeks after our trip felt like a turning point. Amy and I were closer than ever, and I was finally starting to see myself as more than just a guy struggling to get by. But life has a way of throwing curveballs just when you think you've got things figured out. One Friday evening, I was cleaning up my apartment when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened the door, Marcus stood there, looking unusually serious. "Hey, Ben," he said, his tone quieter than usual. "Got a minute?" I nodded and stepped aside to let him in. He sat down on the couch, rubbing the back of his neck, a telltale sign he was nervous. "What's going on?" I asked, sitting across from him. "I just wanted to clear the air," he said. "I know things have been weird between us since everything with Amy. I want to apologize for putting you in that position. I didn't realize how much it was affecting you." I stared at him, surprised. Marcus wasn't one to admit fault easily, but the sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. "Thanks," I said after a moment. "I appreciate that, and I'm sorry too, for blowing up at you. I should have said something sooner instead of letting it build up." We talked for a while, hashing out the tension that had been simmering between us for months. By the time Marcus left, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. We weren't back to being best friends, but at least the animosity was gone. Amy and I spent the rest of the summer balancing work, school, and each other. She was preparing for a big internship with a local publishing house, and I was focused on securing my own opportunities in logistics. We still found time for simple pleasures: late-night walks, weekend drives, and quiet evenings at my apartment. One night, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, Amy rested her head on my shoulder and sighed. "What's on your mind?" I asked. "Just thinking about how far we've come," she said. "A year ago, I never would have imagined this." "Neither would I admitted. "But I'm glad we're here." She smiled and laced her fingers through mine. "Me too." By the time fall semester began, our routines shifted again. Amy was busier than ever with her internship, and I was juggling a heavier course load along with my part-time job. Despite our packed schedules, we made it work, carving out time for each other whenever we could. One Sunday afternoon, I was sitting at my desk, working on a paper, when my phone buzzed with a text from Amy. "Can I come over? I need to talk to you." Something about her message made my stomach tighten, but I replied quickly, "Of course. Come by whenever." She arrived a half hour later, her face serious as she stepped inside. I set my laptop aside and motioned for her to sit. "What's going on?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "I got an offer," she said, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "The publishing house wants to hire me full-time after I graduate. It's an amazing opportunity, Ben, but it's in Chicago." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Chicago," I repeated, trying to process what she was saying. She nodded. "I know it's far, and I don't want this to change anything between us, but I couldn't not tell you." I took a deep breath, my mind racing. "When do you have to decide?" "They gave me until next month," she said, her voice soft. I needed you to know." I nodded, reaching for her hand. "We'll figure it out, Amy. We've come this far, we'll figure it out." Her eyes softened, and she squeezed my hand. "Thank you." The weeks that followed Amy's announcement were a blur. We talked about her opportunity in Chicago often, trying to figure out what it would mean for us. She was torn between taking the job and staying closer to home, and I was determined not to hold her back. One evening, as we sat on the couch in my apartment, she turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Ben, what do you think I should do?" she asked softly. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees as I considered my words. "I think you should do what's best for you," I said finally. "This is a big opportunity, Amy. You've worked hard for it, and I don't want to be the reason you don't take it." Her eyes searched mine, and I could see the conflict in her expression. "But what about us?" she asked. "We'll figure it out," I said, reaching for her hand. "If this is meant to work, we'll find a way." Amy nodded, but I could tell the decision was weighing heavily on her. The month Amy had to make her choice passed quickly. She threw herself into her internship, trying to distract herself from the inevitable. I supported her as best I could, but the uncertainty gnawed at me. Finally, one Saturday afternoon, she showed up at my door with a determined look on her face. "I took the job," she said, stepping inside. "I start in January." I felt a pang in my chest, but I forced a smile. "That's great, Amy. I'm proud of you. Are you really okay with this?" she asked, her voice trembling. Honestly, I said, taking a deep breath. It's going to be hard. But I meant what I said. We'll figure it out. She nodded, and for the first time in weeks, a small smile broke through her worry. Thank you, Ben. That means more than you know. As the semester drew to a close, we made the most of the time we had left together. We spent quiet evenings cooking dinner, drove to our favorite hiking trails on weekends, and talked about how we'd make a long-distance relationship work. It wasn't going to be easy, but we were determined to try. On Amy's last night in town before she left for Chicago, we sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the snow fall outside. The room was quiet, the only sound the faint hum of the heater. I'm going to miss this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Me too, I admitted. But this isn't goodbye, Amy. It's just a new chapter. She leaned her head against my shoulder, and for a long time we just sat there, holding on to the moment. The weeks after Amy moved to Chicago were harder than I expected. We talked on the phone every night, and she visited when she could, but the distance was a constant reminder of how much had changed. Still, we made it work, holding on to the connection we'd built over the past year. As I prepared to graduate and start my own career, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. Amy and I had faced challenges before, and we'd come through stronger. Whatever the future held, I was ready to face it, with her by my side, even if from afar. Graduation came faster than I anticipated. The days were a blur of finals, job applications, and bittersweet goodbyes. Amy couldn't make it to the ceremony because of her new job in Chicago, but she called the night before to wish me luck. I'm so proud of you, Ben, she said, her voice filled with warmth. I wish I could be there. It's okay, I replied. You've got your responsibilities, and I'll have plenty of people here cheering me on. Still, she said softly, I'll be thinking of you. Hearing her say that eased the ache of her absence, at least a little. After the ceremony, I celebrated with my parents, who had been there through every struggle, and Marcus, who, despite everything, had shown up to support me. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. A week after graduation, I packed up my apartment and moved back to my hometown temporarily while I finalized plans for a job. I'd secured an entry-level position in logistics with a company in Indianapolis, which was a reasonable distance from Chicago. Amy was thrilled when I told her. This is perfect, she said during one of our nightly phone calls. We'll be close enough to visit more often. It'll be good, I agreed, though the thought of navigating long distance while starting a new job still felt daunting. We'll make it work. I know we will, she said confidently. Starting my new job was both exciting and overwhelming. The company was fast-paced, the work challenging but rewarding. I threw myself into the role, eager to prove myself. Amy and I made a habit of visiting each other on weekends when our schedules allowed. Sometimes I'd drive up to Chicago. Other times, she'd come down to Indianapolis. One weekend, as we sat together in her apartment overlooking the city, Amy brought up a topic that had been on both our minds. Have you thought about where this is going? She asked, her tone careful. I paused, considering her words. I admitted. I see a future with you, Amy. I wouldn't be doing this, making this work if I didn't. Relief and happiness flashed across her face. Me too, she said. I know it's not easy, but I think we're building something real. Me too, I echoed, and for the first time, I felt certain we could make it through whatever challenges lay ahead. Over the months that followed, Amy and I settled into a rhythm. Our visits became the highlight of my weeks, and we started planning for the future more seriously. By the time our one-year anniversary came around, we both knew we were ready for the next step. During one of her visits to Indianapolis, I surprised her with a small but meaningful gesture. As we walked through a park on a crisp fall afternoon, I pulled out a simple gold ring. Not an engagement ring, but a promise ring. Amy, I said, taking her hand, this is a promise. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want it to include you. Her eyes filled with tears as she slipped the ring onto her finger. I want that too, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Life continued to throw challenges our way, but with each one, we grew stronger together. My job grew more demanding, and Amy's responsibilities in Chicago increased. But we made it work. We learned to communicate better, to support each other even from a distance, and to celebrate the small victories along the way. As the years went on, Our love story became one of resilience and commitment. We weren't perfect, but we were perfect for each other. Months passed, and the rhythm of long-distance life settled in, though it wasn't without its challenges. Amy's work in Chicago became more demanding, and my job in Indianapolis was equally consuming. Our weekend visits were like an oasis, but the time apart still weighed on both of us. One Saturday, I arrived at Amy's apartment after a long drive. She greeted me at the door with her usual warm smile, but there was something in her eyes, a hesitation I couldn't quite place. "Hey," I said, pulling her into a hug. "Everything okay?" She nodded, but her grip on me lingered a little longer than usual. "Yeah, I missed you." We spent the evening cooking dinner together, a ritual we'd adopted during our visits. As we ate, Amy seemed quieter than usual, her gaze drifting out the window more than once. Finally, I put my fork down and broke the silence. "Something's on your mind," I said. "What is it?" Amy hesitated, then sighed. "Ben, I've been thinking about us. About this distance and how it's affecting both of us. I love you, and I want this to work, but I'm starting to wonder how sustainable this is." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Are you saying you want to break up?" I asked, my voice steady but tense. "No," she said quickly. "That's not what I'm saying. I don't want us to keep living in limbo. We've been talking about the future for months, but we haven't really made any concrete plans." I leaned back in my chair, processing her words. She wasn't wrong. We'd been living week to week, holding on to the hope that things would magically get easier. But they hadn't. "So what do you want to do?" I asked. Amy looked at me, her eyes searching mine. "I think we need to figure out what comes next. Whether that means one of us moving, or something else." The conversation stuck with me long after that weekend ended. As I drove back to Indianapolis, my mind raced with possibilities. I cared deeply for Amy, but I also knew that the way we were living wasn't sustainable in the long term. One of us would have to make a change. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into my work, hoping the distraction would give me clarity. But the question loomed over every quiet moment: was I willing to uproot my life for Amy? And if so, would it be enough? One Friday evening, as I sat in my apartment staring at my phone, I made a decision. I called Amy, my heart pounding as the phone rang. "Hey, Ben," she answered, her voice warm but cautious. "What's up?" "I've been thinking," I said, cutting straight to the point, "about what you said, the future. And I think it's time we stop just talking about it and start doing something about it." "What do you mean?" she asked, her tone wary but hopeful. "I mean, I'm willing to move," I said, the words feeling both terrifying and freeing as they left my mouth. "If this is going to work, we need to be in the same city." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment I thought I'd miscalculated. Then Amy spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "Ben, are you sure? That's a big decision." "I'm sure," I said firmly. "I want this to work, Amy, and I'm willing to do what it takes." The process of relocating to Chicago wasn't easy. It took months of planning, job applications, and logistical headaches. But with each step, I felt a growing sense of purpose. Amy and I had weathered so much together, and this felt like the next logical step. By the time I moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, I felt a cautious optimism. We were finally in the same place, and for the first time in years, it felt like we could truly build a life together. The day I moved to Chicago felt like the beginning of a new chapter. Amy was there to greet me as I unloaded the last of my boxes into my tiny apartment. It wasn't much, a one-bedroom on the edge of the city, but it was mine and it was close to her. "This place has potential," Amy said, smiling as she looked around. "We'll make it homey in no time." I teased, raising an eyebrow. She grinned. "Of course. What's the point of living in the same city if I can't come over and rearrange your furniture?" I laughed, grateful for her lightheartedness. The move had been stressful, but seeing her excitement made it all worth it. The first few weeks in Chicago were an adjustment. I started a new job in logistics for a mid-sized company, and the fast pace of the city took some getting used to. But knowing Amy was just a short drive away made the transition easier. We quickly settled into a routine, spending evenings cooking dinner, exploring the city, or simply lounging on the couch watching old movies. The proximity brought us closer, but it also brought new challenges. Little things, like her tendency to leave her shoes in the middle of the living room or my habit of working late, started to surface. But we navigated those bumps with patience and humor. One Saturday, as we sat on the balcony of her apartment overlooking the city, Amy turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Have you ever thought about where this is all going?" she asked, her tone serious but not heavy. I took a sip of my coffee, considering her question. "I have," I said. "I think about it a lot. And I know I want a future with you, Amy." Her eyes softened, and she reached for my hand. "I want that too, Ben." As the months passed, our relationship grew stronger. We started talking seriously about the future, what it might look like to move in together, to build a life as a team. It wasn't always easy. My tendency to overthink and Amy's impulsiveness sometimes clashed, but we learned to meet each other halfway. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I arrived at her apartment to find her sitting on the couch with a small box in her lap. "What's that?" I asked, dropping my bag by the door. She smiled and held it out to me. "Open it." Inside was a key, her spare apartment key. "I figured it was time," she said, her voice light but meaningful. "You're here all the time anyway." I grinned, holding the key up to the light. "Does this mean I get to rearrange your furniture now?" She laughed. "Only if you're ready to lose a hand." By the end of that year, we had taken the next step and officially moved in together. Sharing a space brought its own set of challenges, but it also brought a sense of partnership I hadn't realized I'd been missing. We were building something together, and for the first time, it felt like everything was falling into place. One night, as we lay in bed, Amy turned to me with a contented smile. "You know, this is exactly what I hoped for." "What's that?" I asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Us," she said simply. "Building a life together." I smiled, pulling her closer. "Me too." Living together turned out to be both rewarding and eye-opening. Amy and I learned each other's quirks in ways we never could have while dating long distance. I discovered that she loved to sing terribly while doing chores, and she learned that I had an uncanny ability to fall asleep mid-conversation if I was tired enough. We laughed, argued, and grew together in ways that made our relationship feel stronger than ever. One evening, as we sat at the kitchen table sorting through bills, Amy looked up from the pile of envelopes with a thoughtful expression. "Ben," she started hesitantly, "have you thought about where you see yourself in 5 years? Like, with us?" I set down the pen I'd been holding and leaned back in my chair. "I think about it all the time," I admitted. "And the truth is, I see myself with you. Wherever that is, whatever we're doing, I just know I want us to be together." Her eyes softened, and she reached across the table to take my hand. "I feel the same way," she said quietly. "It's just, I've been thinking a lot about what comes next." I raised an eyebrow, sensing there was more to her words. "What are you thinking?" She hesitated, then smiled nervously. "Marriage, kids, building a life together." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. It wasn't the first time the topic had come up, but this time it felt more real, more immediate. "I want those things too," I said finally, "but I also want to make sure we're ready. I don't want to rush into anything just because it feels like the next step." Amy nodded, her smile returning. "I agree. I just wanted to talk about it, you know? Make sure we're on the same page." "We are," I assured her, squeezing her hand. "When the time's right, we'll know." Months turned into a year, and our life together continued to evolve. We took a weekend trip to the mountains, got a dog, a scrappy little mutt we named Charlie, and spent lazy Sundays exploring Chicago's neighborhoods. It wasn't perfect. We still had our disagreements and moments of doubt, but we faced them together. One Saturday, as we walked through a park with Charlie trotting happily beside us, Amy stopped suddenly and turned to me. "Ben," she said, her voice unusually serious, "I need to tell you something." I froze, my heart skipping a beat. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, her eyes searching mine. "I love you. I've loved you for a long time, but I don't think I've ever said it outright." Relief and warmth flooded through me, and I smiled, reaching for her hands. "I love you too, Amy. I think I always have." Her face lit up with a mix of joy and relief, and in that moment, the world around us seemed to fade away. That conversation marked a turning point in our relationship. Saying the words out loud felt like crossing a threreshold, cementing everything we'd built together over the years. It wasn't long after that I started thinking seriously about the next step. I spent weeks planning, researching rings, and figuring out the best way to propose. Amy was sharp, and I knew it would be hard to surprise her, but I wanted to make the moment special. One crisp autumn afternoon, I suggested we take Charlie back to the park where she had first told me she loved me. As we walked, the leaves crunching underfoot and the golden light filtering through the trees, I stopped by the same bench where we'd shared that conversation. "Amy," I said, my heart pounding as I turned to her, "there's something I need to ask you." She looked at me curiously, and I dropped to one knee, pulling the small velvet box from my pocket. "Amy Saunders," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. "You've made me a better person in ways I never thought possible. I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" Her hands flew to her mouth, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. Then she nodded emphatically, her eyes shining with tears. "Yes, Ben, of course I will." I slipped the ring onto her finger, and as she pulled me to my feet, Charlie barked excitedly, as if offering his own approval. The months that followed were a whirlwind of wedding planning, family gatherings, and countless conversations about our future. But through it all, one thing remained constant: the love and partnership we had built, one step at a time. We knew there would be challenges ahead, but we also knew we could face them together. And for the first time in a long time, the future felt like a promise, not a question. Wedding planning turned out to be both exhilarating and exhausting. Amy was a whirlwind of ideas, from the venue to the flowers to the guest list. I found myself swept up in her enthusiasm, even as I tried to maintain some semblance of practicality. "Do we really need ice sculptures?" I asked one evening as we sat at the dining table surrounded by brochures and spreadsheets. Amy rolled her eyes playfully. "It's not about need, Ben. It's about ambience." "I'm just saying," I replied with a grin. "We could use that money for something more functional, like a honeymoon." Her expression softened at the mention of the honeymoon. "You're right. Maybe we can compromise. No ice sculptures, but we still get the string quartet for the ceremony." "Deal," I said, reaching across the table to shake her hand. It was moments like these that reminded me why I loved her. Not just her passion, but her willingness to meet me halfway. The wedding day arrived on a crisp spring morning. The venue was a small, picturesque chapel surrounded by blooming gardens. Amy's parents sat in the front row, her father beaming with pride and her mother dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. My parents were there too, their expressions a mix of joy and quiet pride. As I stood at the altar, watching Amy walk down the aisle in a simple yet stunning dress, I felt a wave of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. This woman had changed my life in ways I couldn't have imagined, and now we were about to take the next step together. The ceremony was a blur of vows, laughter, and tears. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, Amy's smile was the brightest thing in the room. As we kissed, the room erupted into applause, and for a moment, the world felt perfect. Our honeymoon was a week-long getaway to a cozy cabin in the mountains. It was a chance to escape the chaos of wedding planning and simply enjoy each other's company. We spent our days hiking, cooking together, and sitting by the fire, talking about everything and nothing. One evening, as we watched the sunset from the porch, Amy leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" she asked softly. "All the time," I replied. "From that first awkward double date to now. It feels like a lifetime ago." She smiled, her eyes reflecting the warm hues of the sunset. "I wouldn't change a thing." "Neither would I," I said, wrapping an arm around her. "Here's to many more adventures." Married life brought its own set of challenges and joys. We learned how to navigate finances together, balanced our demanding jobs, and started talking about the possibility of buying a house. Charlie, our scrappy little dog, became the center of our small family, his antics providing endless entertainment. One Sunday afternoon, as we sat on the couch with Charlie sprawled across our laps, Amy looked at me with a mischievous glint in her eye. "What would you say?" she began. "If I told you I was thinking about adding a new member to the family?" I froze, my mind racing. "Are you talking about a puppy? Or something else?" She laughed, her hand resting on my arm. "Something else. Something human." The realization hit me like a jolt, and a slow smile spread across my face. "Are you saying?" She nodded, her eyes sparkling. "I think I'm ready, Ben. What about you?" I didn't hesitate. I'm ready to. The months that followed were filled with anticipation and preparation. Amy and I dove into baby books, set up a nursery, and marveled at every step of the journey. When our daughter, Lily, arrived on a chilly winter morning, it was the culmination of everything we had worked toward and dreamed of. As I held her tiny hand in mine, I looked at Amy, exhausted but glowing with happiness, and felt a sense of gratitude so profound it brought tears to my eyes. "We did it," I whispered. Amy smiled, her eyes shining. "We did." Life continued to evolve in ways we couldn't have imagined. Parenthood brought its own set of challenges, but it also deepened our bond. Through sleepless nights and endless diaper changes, we leaned on each other, finding strength in the partnership we'd built over the years. Looking back on the journey, from awkward beginnings to the life we had created together, I realized that every step, every challenge, and every triumph had brought us to this moment. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly at home. Parenthood changed everything. Suddenly, the focus of our lives shifted to this tiny, fragile person who depended on us for everything. Lily was a whirlwind of joy and chaos, her cries filling the quiet corners of our home, her laughter lighting up even the darkest days. Amy and I quickly found our rhythm, though it wasn't without its struggles. We traded late-night feedings and diaper changes, learning to communicate in a new way, through bleary-eyed glances and quiet reassurances. Somehow, even in the exhaustion, we found moments of pure happiness. One night, as I rocked Lily to sleep in the dim light of the nursery, Amy appeared in the doorway, a soft smile on her face. "You're a natural," she whispered. I chuckled quietly, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. "I'm just winging it. Aren't we all?" she said, stepping into the room and wrapping her arms around me. "But you're doing great, Ben. Really." I looked down at Lily, her tiny hand curled around my finger, and felt a warmth I couldn't describe. "She makes it worth it," I said softly. The first year with Lily flew by. Before we knew it, she was crawling, then walking, then babbling words that sounded almost like sentences. Each milestone felt like a victory, and we celebrated them all, from her first steps to her first birthday. Amy balanced her career and motherhood with a grace that amazed me. She still had her fire, her passion, but she also had a softness now, a tenderness that came from being Lily's mom. Watching her with our daughter only deepened my love for her. One evening, as we sat on the couch after putting Lily to bed, Amy turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think about having another?" she asked, her voice careful. I raised an eyebrow, a slow smile spreading across my face. "Another what?" She rolled her eyes, laughing. "Another baby, Ben. What did you think I meant?" I leaned back, considering her question. "Honestly, I thought about it. But are we ready for that?" She shrugged, resting her head on my shoulder. "I don't know, but I've been thinking about it a lot lately. Lily would love a sibling." I wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "Let's give it some time. When we're ready, we'll know." By the time Lily turned 3, our lives had settled into a comfortable routine. I had advanced in my career, Amy was thriving at her publishing house, and we'd even bought a house in a quiet suburb, complete with a big backyard for Lily and Charlie to play in. It was during a sunny afternoon in that backyard, as Lily chased Charlie across the grass, that Amy turned to me with a smile. "I think we're ready," she said simply. "For what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "For another," she said, her eyes shining with excitement. I nodded, taking her hand. "Let's do it." The journey to baby number 2 was a little more challenging, but when our son, Jack, arrived a year later, it felt like our family was complete. Lily adored her baby brother, and Charlie seemed to take on the role of protector, always hovering nearby. Our days were filled with laughter and chaos, but they were also filled with love. Amy and I had built something together, something strong and enduring. And as I watched our children grow, I realized that every step of our journey had been leading to this. Years later, as I sat on the porch with Amy, watching Lily and Jack chase each other across the yard, I turned to her with a smile. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" I asked. "All the time," she replied, her gaze soft. "And I wouldn't change a thing." "Me neither," I said, reaching for her hand. "Not a single thing. Life was never perfect, but it was ours. And that, I realized, was all I'd ever wanted." The years passed in a steady rhythm, and life unfolded in ways both predictable and surprising. Lily and Jack grew into vibrant, curious kids, filling our days with their endless energy and boundless imagination. Charlie, ever the loyal companion, became a constant fixture in their games, patiently enduring tea parties and pirate adventures alike. Amy and I marveled at how quickly time seemed to fly. One moment we were rocking infants to sleep, and the next we were helping Lily prepare for her first day of kindergarten. "She's going to be amazing," Amy said as we stood by the doorway, watching Lily nervously adjust her backpack. "She's got your determination. And your charm," I added, earning a playful nudge from Amy. When we dropped Lily off at school, she gave us a brave wave before disappearing into the classroom. Amy squeezed my hand as we walked back to the car, her eyes misty. "She's growing up so fast," she said softly. I nodded, feeling a mix of pride and nostalgia. "She's ready, though, and so are we." As the kids grew older, new challenges emerged. Lily, ever the independent spirit, developed a knack for testing boundaries, while Jack's quiet nature often masked his deep sensitivity. Amy and I found ourselves navigating the complexities of parenting, learning to balance discipline with understanding. One evening, after a particularly long day of refereeing sibling squabbles, Amy collapsed onto the couch with a dramatic sigh. "Remind me why we thought 2 kids was a good idea," she joked, tossing a throw pillow at me. Caught it and grinned. "Because we're gluttons for punishment?" She laughed, the sound easing the tension of the day. "They're worth it, though. Every bit," I agreed, sitting down beside her. "Even when they're driving us insane." Despite the challenges, our family found its rhythm. Weekends were spent at soccer games and dance recitals. Family movie nights became a cherished tradition, and summers were filled with road trips to national parks and visits to Amy's parents. One summer, as we sat around a campfire during a trip to the mountains, Lily looked up at the stars and asked, "What do you think it's like out there?" "Out where?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. "In space," she said, her eyes wide with wonder. "Do you think there are people like us?" Amy smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. "Maybe. The universe is a big place." Jack, sitting quietly beside me, chimed in. "Do you think they have dogs like Charlie?" We all laughed, the sound echoing into the night. It was moments like these, simple, unplanned, and filled with joy, that reminded me of what really mattered. As the kids grew into teenagers, life became a whirlwind of school projects, extracurricular activities, and the occasional teenage rebellion. Lily discovered a passion for art, filling the house with sketches and paintings, while Jack found his calling on the soccer field, his quiet determination earning him a spot on the varsity team. Amy and I watched with pride as they pursued their passions, even as we struggled to keep up with their ever-changing schedules. Our marriage, though tested by the demands of parenting, remained a source of strength and stability. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching a summer storm roll in, Amy leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you ever miss the days when they were little?" she asked. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but I like who they're becoming, and I like that we're doing this together." She smiled, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Me too." As the years went on, our family faced its share of ups and downs, losses, triumphs, and everything in between. But through it all, we held on to each other, finding strength in the love we had built. Looking back, I realized that every twist and turn of our journey had led us to this life, a life filled with laughter, love, and memories that would last a lifetime. And for that, I was endlessly grateful. Years turned into decades, and life unfolded with all its unpredictable beauty. Lily and Jack grew up, each carving their own path in the world. Lily became an artist, her work gracing galleries and homes, her fiery independence tempered by a deep compassion. Jack pursued soccer into college, eventually becoming a coach who inspired young players with his quiet determination. Amy and I watched with pride as they built lives of their own, our house gradually growing quieter but never losing its warmth. Charlie, our loyal companion through so much of it, passed peacefully one fall afternoon, leaving a void that was filled with cherished memories. One evening, after the kids had moved out and the house had settled into a new rhythm, Amy and I sat on the back porch, watching the sun set over the horizon. The years had added lines to our faces and streaks of gray to our hair, but the love between us had only deepened. "We've had a good life," Amy said, her voice soft. "We have," I agreed, taking her hand in mine. Better than I ever could have imagined. She smiled, her gaze lingering on the horizon. Do you ever think about how it all started? That awkward double date, the years of long distance. I chuckled. And here we are, still together. I'd say we did pretty well. We did, she said, leaning her head on my shoulder. Better than pretty well. As the years continued, Amy and I embraced the next chapter of our lives. We traveled, explored new hobbies, and found joy in the small moments. Quiet mornings with coffee, evenings spent watching the stars, and visits from Lily, Jack, and eventually, their families. One day, as we sat in the garden Amy had nurtured for years, surrounded by blooming flowers and the laughter of our grandchildren, she turned to me with a smile. This, she said, gesturing to the scene before us, is everything I ever wanted. I reached for her hand, my heart full. Me too, Amy. Me too. In the twilight of our lives, we found ourselves reflecting often on the journey we had shared. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, filled with love, laughter, and moments of quiet strength. And as we faced the inevitable passage of time, we did so with gratitude for the life we had built together. In the end, it wasn't the milestones or grand gestures that defined our story. It was the everyday moments, the shared smiles, the whispered reassurances, the unwavering support through life's challenges that truly mattered. As I sat beside Amy one quiet evening, holding her hand and watching the stars, I realized that the life we had created together was the greatest adventure of all. And for that, I would always be thankful.